Hey, everybody, it's Amanda, and it's time for our evening Bible study. I am by myself tonight because Rick fell asleep. And so I'm not going to wake him up. I'm just going to do the Bible study alone and let him sleep. He's worked, I think, about 60 hours this week, and he's just had a really busy one. So I hope you will forgive his absence, and he's got tomorrow off. I hope he gets a little bit of rest. He worked like 13 days in a row or something like that, and he is just so worn out. So I'm going to give him a pass, and I hope you will too. but we can continue in Joshua on our own, and I think that we'll still have a great Bible study. So it's been quite the busy day for us. My nose is itchy. Of course, when I go live, my nose gets itchy. Our younger son, Ricky, was traveling today because he and his wife are moving to California, and they are going to be working in a ministry there. And we've kind of been on pins and needles all day as they were doing their different flights and traveling and all the different things that they've been doing. And thankfully, they have landed all their flights safely, and they are going to be tucking in tonight in a new home. And the Lord has blessed their journey. But it was also crazy because we had tornado warnings here. Like Rick and I ran out to dump trash, and while we were out dumping trash, we could hear the sirens going off, and that was a little bit crazy. And then there was a little bit, more than a little bit, a very unfortunate incident tonight. Also, a friend of many of our children, he worked for a local pizza delivery place and was out delivering pizzas in the midst of the crazy weather and the tornado warnings. And he was hit head on and lost his life. And it was very unexpected. And so we'll be praying for his family. I won't give his name. I think they're still notifying family members. There's not anything on social media yet, except that, people who are all friends are all connected and they all know what's going on. So it's just been a day of crazy emotions here. I think there's just been a lot of ups and downs. And anyway, it's difficult when you have times like that, because some days you have really, great, joyous days when things are happening. And that's wonderful. But then you have days that are like filled with stress and difficulties, and it's really easy to let those get you down. But, this is the great thing about having our evening Bible study. And, the Bible talks about coming to the Lord morning and evening. Not that you shouldn't always be going to the Lord and always know that you can go to him in prayer and things like that. But specifically going in morning and evening, you can easily get distracted through your day. But if you have an appointment, so to speak, with the Lord every day to go to him and be in his word and be in prayer, that when those rough times come, it's almost like an appointment with peace. You know what I mean? You okay? Yes. Okay. There is Rick with no, Rick is sleeping. We don't know the family. Some of the kids know the family. Well, know the person. So we don't know them, but I don't know. I don't know how that's going to play out. But anyway, it's just nice to have that appointment with the Lord to kind of balance the emotions of the day and just remind you, ultimately he's in control. And even when things seem out of control, they're not, because he has a plan in each and every circumstance. He had a plan with Ricky and Alyssa traveling across the country and all the different things. He has a plan with the tornado warnings, and he even has a plan for that young man and his family. So anyway, even though it's been a day of crazy emotions, it's nice to come right back here with you guys and be in God's word. I mean, I can't think of a better way to, who wants to sit around and watch the news or TV or things that are just going to make you stressed and depressed? Getting in God's word is the best place that you can be. So we are going to continue in Joshua. I'm going to go ahead and read all of chapter 2 today because I'm me and I can go through more of the Bible than my husband. I'm not as entertaining as him, I'm afraid. But I can go through it a little quicker. And I'm actually kind of glad that I get to go through this chapter because this is Rahab. We're going to talk about the Rahab getting introduced. And one of the great things about Rahab is that, this story, she doesn't seem like that big of a biblical character. And yet we see her here in Joshua, but then we also see her in the line of Christ. You can see that Christ came through her, which what a tremendous blessing that is. And then she's also mentioned in Hebrews 11 in the Hall of Fame of Faith. So I mean, she is someone that the Lord really blessed in a way that's beyond even her time. Things that went down the line, she was blessed and a blessing. So I think there's just a lot to learn from her as a lady, much less as a Christian in general. I forgot my water, but that's all right. So anyway, I'm going to read Joshua chapter 2, and it's not too long. It's about 24 verses. But if you want to read along with me, we are going to start at verse 1. You guys ready? All right. Joshua chapter 2, verse 1, and it says, "And Joshua the son of Nun sent out of Shittim 2 men to spy secretly, saying, Go view the land, even Jericho. And they went and came into an harlot's house named Rahab and lodged there. And it was told the king of Jericho, saying, Behold, there came men in hither tonight of the children of Israel to search out the country. And the king of Jericho sent unto Rahab, saying, Bring forth the men that are come to thee, which are entered into thine house, for they be come to search out all the country. And the woman took the 2 men and hid them, and said thus, There came men unto me, but I wist not whence they were. And it came to pass about the time of shutting of the gate, when it was dark, that the men went out. Whither the men went, I wot not. Pursue after them quickly, for ye shall overtake them. But she had brought them up to the roof of the house, and hid them with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order upon the roof. And the men pursued after them the way to Jordan unto the fords. And as soon as they which pursued after them were gone out, they shut the gate. And before they were laid down, she came up unto them upon the roof. And she said unto the men, I know that the Lord hath given you the land, and that your terror is fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when ye came out of Egypt, and what ye did unto the 2 kings of the Amorites that were on the other side of Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom ye utterly destroyed. And as soon as we had heard these things, our hearts did melt, neither did there remain any more courage in any man because of you, for the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and in earth beneath. Now therefore I pray you, swear unto me by the Lord, since I have showed you kindness, that ye will also show kindness unto my father's house, and give me a true token, and that ye will save alive my father and my mother and my brethren and my sisters, and all that they have, and deliver our lives from death. And the men answered her, Our life for yours, if ye utter not this our business. And it shall be, when the Lord hath given us the land, that we will deal kindly and truly with thee. Then she let them down by a cord through the window from her house, for her house was upon the town wall, and she dwelt upon the wall. And she said unto them, Get you to the mountain, lest the pursuers meet you, and hide yourselves there 3 days, until the pursuers be returned, and afterward ye may go your way. And the men said unto her, We will be blameless of this thine oath, which thou hast made us swear. Behold, when we come into the land, thou shalt bind this line of scarlet thread in the window, which thou didst let us down by. And thou shalt bring thy father and thy mother and thy brethren and all thy father's household home unto thee. And it shall be that whosoever shall go out of the doors of thy house into the street, his blood shall be upon his head, and we will be guiltless. And whosoever shall be with thee in the house, his blood shall be on our head, if any hand be upon him. And if thou utter this our business, then we will quit of thine oath which thou hast made us to swear. And she said, According to your words, so be it. And she sent them away, and they departed, and she bound the scarlet line in the window. And they went and came unto the mountain, and abode there 3 days, until the pursuers were returned. And the pursuers sought them throughout all the way, but found them not. So the 2 men returned and descended from the mountain, and passed over, and came to Joshua the son of Nun, and told him all things that befell them. And they said unto Joshua, truly the Lord hath delivered into our hands all the land, for even all the inhabitants of the country do faint because of us. So that is Joshua chapter 2. Okay, how does that remind you of Passover, Shauna? That's interesting. Okay, so here we have Joshua, and he is sending out spies. He knows that they're going into Jericho, and he wants to know what's going on in the land. I think anytime you make a decision, you want to have as much information as possible before you make decisions. And so wisely, he's sending out essentially a research party to figure out, what the circumstances are. He's getting information. So they went and interestingly, they came into a harlot's house and her name was Rahab, and they stayed with her. That she was their lodging place. And so first of all, let's talk about Rahab being a harlot. I think this is so important because as I mentioned to you, Rahab has such a big impact on really all of the things that are important in the Bible. I mean, just being in the line of Christ is so significant. Like, I mean, I have no words for that. Oh, the red paint over the door. Yes, I totally see that. Keeping everyone safe. You are so right. But she was a harlot. She was someone that would have completely been looked down on by society. And yet the Lord, number one, used her. And number two, blessed her. And, I think there's such amazing things that you would say out of that. But we'll talk more about that in a second. So anyway, I just want to go over the general story real fast. So anyway, they meet Rahab the harlot. They stay at her place. And the king hears that these guys are there. And he's like asking Rahab, he's like, I know these guys came to you. Bring them to me. And she's like, well, yeah, they came, but I don't know where they are. They went out around the time of the shutting of the gate, and I don't really know where they are, but if you go after them quickly, you probably will overtake them. But really what had happened was she put them up on her roof, and she had these stalks of flax that were up there drying, and she hid them underneath that. And so the men left and went to pursue after where they thought the Israelites were. And as soon as they left, they shut the gate. So there was no escape for them if they were still in the city. So she came up to them on the roof, and she has this conversation with them, which I think speaks volumes about her heart and where it is. But she says, I know, the key word there, know, that the Lord has given you the land. I know that. She said, your terror has fallen on us and everybody's fainted because of you. We heard how the Lord dried up the Red Sea and got you out of Egypt and gave you victory over those two kings of the Amorites that you utterly destroyed. And when we heard that, our hearts melted and we didn't have any courage because the Lord is your God and he is God in heaven and earth beneath. And she said, so here's the deal. Since I'm showing you kindness, I want you to show me some kindness and my father's house. And I want you to save alive my family. And they said, all right, if you don't tell anyone what happened, then we will deal kindly with you. We'll return the favor. So she let them down by a cord, and it was a scarlet or red cord out the window. And because her story was on the wall, or her house was on the wall, and she told them to run to the mountains so the pursuers wouldn't get her and to get them and to hide there for 3 days, and then they could go. And they made this deal with her, and they said, take this scarlet thing and bind it. Bind this line of scarlet thread in the window that they were let down from, right? And so that way they knew where she was located. And he said, when things start to happen, bring everybody into your house, right? And basically no one's going to go in there, okay? If you have them in your house and the door is secured, nobody's going to go in there. But if they go out, if they leave that house, then their blood is on their hands. But if somebody comes into your house, then their blood is on our hands. They're going to take responsibility for it. But they said, but if you go telling people what happened, then this oath is not gonna happen anymore. And she's like, fine. so be it. And she's like, go ahead. And she tied it up in the window, and that was her commitment. So they did exactly what she said. They went in the mountain for 3 days, and eventually the pursuers went ahead and returned home. So they made their way back to Joshua, told him everything that happened. And Joshua was, contented with that. He's like, the Lord has delivered us the land. So he said, even all the inhabitants are fainting because of us. The king himself went to look for them. So this is just kind of the beginning of the story. We haven't gotten to the full Battle of Jericho yet, but this is just kind of that introduction to Rahab and how all of this begins to come together. So again, the star of this show is Rahab. Rahab, because, the key here, if I may, I'm going to kind of go out of order. I know we normally go like verse by verse, but I'm going to go out of order a little bit, because I think the most important things that you hear from Rahab are probably verses 9 through 13. So I'm going to start there, because we've talked a lot between our studies in the Old Testament and our studies in the New Testament about the importance of faith, right? We said from the Old Testament to the New Testament, what hasn't changed is how the Lord responds to people who have faith in him, right? The salvation was always by grace through faith. The law was there for his believers to follow, to help them. But for someone to belong to the Lord, it was always about faith. And so here you have Rahab, and she completely displays, even though she's not an Israelite. So this is another example. Remember, we were just talking about in the book of Romans, Paul was talking about how it was always God's plan for the Gentiles to be saved and come to know him. Well, Rahab was not an Israelite. She was living in Jericho. And yet, being a Gentile, being in this foreign land, and having foreign kings and having foreign teachings, hearing about who God is and what he does and what he has done, she came to a place where she had faith in him. And that faith, and this is how you know it was true faith, not only was she expressive about it, but it translated into her actions, which again is something I think that we talked a lot about in the book of Romans, right? So first of all, verse 9, she said, I know, and I think again, know is the key word there. I know that the Lord hath given you the land. And your terror has fallen on us, and all the inhabitants faint because of you. All of the other people, I don't know how I want to say this. All of the other people believed God had the power to destroy them. That's why they were fainting and had this terror, because they knew that God had already done these mighty works and he was capable of doing that to them too. But what they lacked was faith in him. Do you understand? And this again, I think is different or similar, depending on how you want to look at it. You have today people who acknowledge God's ability to be God, the fact that he's capable of doing many things, and yet not actually trusting in him is what makes the difference. Do you see what I'm saying? So Rahab trusted in him. She knew that he was going to do a certain thing, and she knew that he was the key to her salvation and his men. But she tells the story about how they heard all these things that he had done. They'd heard about the Red Sea and how they came out of Egypt. Well, of course, that had been many years before that. Joshua and Caleb were the two of the spies that were left, and everyone else died in that 40 years they wandered in the wilderness. So it's been at least 40 years. And Joshua was already an adult at that point, so it was already, been many, many years since they had been escaped Egypt and wandering in the wilderness. And yet all the people knew the circumstances. They'd heard about it. They were very clear on God and his power and who his blessing was upon. And they didn't want to mess with them. They didn't want to have anything to do with it, right? But not only that, they'd also heard the things that had happened since then, how they'd been in these battles with other kings, and they had been utterly destroyed. And it just kind of confirmed to them that God's power and his commitment was to this people who were his people, right? And so people were rightly so afraid, right? Yes, exactly. History was repeating itself because Joshua was now the spy standing outside. Exactly. So, so they'd heard all of those things. They said their heart melted and there was no courage. It says, because of you, God's people, for the Lord your God, this is, I think, essentially where you hear Rahab's faith. The Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and in earth beneath. She acknowledges that he is the God, the only God. There are a lot of different cultures, a lot of different groups of people out there, and they were worshiping a lot of different gods. Rahab was not confused by any of this. She does not have any lack of faith at this point. She is not thinking, he's pretty strong. He might be a good, a strong God, or yeah, I think you might have something there. She doesn't. She's not hesitant about it at all. She said, "Your God is God in heaven above and in earth beneath." Period. Like she lays it out, and so not only does she acknowledge her faith there, acknowledge that she understands who God is and his power, his authority, his might, but then the other things that she does show that she is committed to following him, right? So she says, now therefore I pray you swear to me by the Lord. So she wants them swearing, by the Lord, only thing that she's really trusting in at this point. That since she showed them kindness, that they'll show kindness to her father's house and save them all alive. So she's relying on their commitment to the Lord because she's really standing on the Lord at this point. She thinks that, he is God in heaven and in earth, and his people who will swear by him are those that she will follow and trust. And so she's really, you understand, she's lied to the king. She's drawn some lines as to where she's going to go here. And her allegiance is to the Lord. It's not to the king. It's not to, anybody else. It's to the Lord. And we've talked a lot recently about obedience to authority. We talked just yesterday about it. And I've heard a lot about it lately too, with all of the things going on in politics. And Rick and I have said many times, the Lord has told us over and over again to be obedient to our authority, unto the point that the authority is going against God. And at that point, we are firmly on God's side. And that's where Rahab was. The king that she had wanted her to betray God and his people. And she was not going to do that. Instead, she took the stand and the line that she was going to be with God and his people. And so therefore, God and his people were going to stand by her. Do you see that's kind of the connection that was happening here? Because the men answered her and said, our life for yours. When the Lord's given us the land, we will deal truly and kindly with thee. They are essentially embracing her with this commitment. She is going to become one of them. So this is such a significant speech here that she gives or has with these gentlemen, because she's taking such a firm stand. We live in a tumultuous political time, and there are certainly places in the world where as a believer, if in order to follow the Lord, you may have to do something that goes against whatever authority that you have. And to take a stance like Rahab's is very dangerous. And few people would be willing to do that. Rahab's willingness to take that sort of stand, to say those things, to stand on the side of God's people, shows her genuine commitment to the Lord. And I think this is, again, something that we have to be aware of and really even be willing to do if necessary. Be willing to stand on God's side, even when it might pose a danger to us and our family even. You know what I'm saying? So exactly. She knew better that God was in charge, not the king. You are 100% right. So I started there, and I'm just going to back up to the beginning and just talk again about the fact that Rahab was a harlot. it's mentioned here. And I don't think the Lord says that, I don't think that was an accident that that was mentioned. Her vocation, so to speak, was intentionally mentioned. And I think the Lord wanted us to know what she did and wanted us to know that she was not a perfect person, that, there were things that she did that went against God's law. But that didn't matter in the end. In the end, what mattered was her faith. And it was her faith that saved her. And her sin did not get in the way of her salvation. Her sin, let me rephrase that because maybe I worded that poorly. Rick would totally have corrected me there. Her sin certainly was keeping her from being saved in the first place, but the Lord has room for forgiveness for any sin. Let me put it that way. There's no sin that Christ's blood can't cover. So she was certainly, like I said, a flawed individual biblically, but that didn't matter because Christ's blood is strong enough for that. And so I feel like there's a lot of people out there who, when it comes to serving the Lord, they look at their life and they think, I have done this, or I have done that, or I am this, or I am that. Or maybe I was this, or I was, we look at our own lives and we often feel like we're not good enough. I've told the story before. I'm sure you guys have heard it, but just in case somebody is new and they haven't heard it, I obviously have talked about how when I was younger, I absolutely did not live for the Lord at all. And really struggled for a lot of years. But came to a point, much like the prodigal, where I was like, I don't want this anymore. And I want the Lord, because I had been to church as a child, and I believe I was saved as a child. I actually think the Lord kept me from a lot of things, but there was still, a place where I was, like I said, prodigal. I was running in a different direction, and he was always waiting for me to return. So anyway, I got to the point that I went back to church and I started reading my Bible again and really started wanting to get close to the Lord. But one of the things that really hindered me was my past, just so much guilt and shame about it. And so I was in church and just kind of feeling like I didn't even belong there. You know what I mean? I felt like everybody else there was like perfect. And that's just how I felt. It absolutely wasn't true, but that's how I felt. And I felt like I certainly did not belong there. And I had this thing going through my mind, just that, I was not worthy. Like I had this unworthy, that was the word that was going through my head. I was sitting there. And so I was sitting there thinking that, and the pastor started preaching. He started preaching out of the book of Nehemiah, and he was talking about what the name Nehemiah means. And he said, you really need to know what your name means, because, the Lord really speaks to us. There's so many places in the Bible where they talk about names and what they mean and how the Lord used that in people's lives. Like, you need to know what your name means, because the Lord really wants to use that in your life. And I was like, oh yeah, what does my name mean? And I started thinking back, trying to remember what my name meant, because I knew it, but I just couldn't think of it in that moment, But then I remembered what my name means, and Amanda means worthy of love. And it just hit me so hard in that moment, because my mom had wanted to call me something else. My mom had wanted to call me Amy, which means, it also is beloved, but Amanda means worthy of love, which it's a small change, but just that word worthy, because I was sitting there thinking unworthy. And knowing my name meant worthy of love meant so much to me in that moment. And I really felt like in that moment that the Lord had made my name Amanda just for that moment. Just so when the time came that I felt unworthy, that I knew that I was worthy, not because I am so great, but because he is, and because, he loves all of his people. But it was such a big moment for me to understand that I was worthy of love. You know what I mean? That the things that I had done in my past and whatever I'd done, that didn't mean that the Lord was ready to throw me away. he could still do a great work with me. And he did. you know, this is probably, I don't know, 15, 20 years down the road from that point. And it's so funny because people who meet Rick and I now think that, like like we have like our YouTube channels, and for whatever reason people think that like I guess we're trying to portray ourselves, or that we seem so like what I used to think those Christians were when I was in church when I was younger, like we're like trying to be perfect or whatever. And I'm like, that's totally not how we're trying to portray ourselves at all. And we try it many as often as possible to remind people that we absolutely are not. Um, but the Lord has done a great work in our lives, and I think over time, I can even see in my own life how I've become more Christ-like, and it's not because of me, it's because of him working in my life. So I can definitely see how the Lord could take Rahab as a harlot, and then she has this great faith and she's trusting in him to the saving of her family, to the point that they are, the only people left when he destroys the entire city because of her faith. One person's faith saved her entire family. And because of that, I think over time she grew in her faith as well, being surrounded by God's people, getting to know him more and more, and ultimately being in the line of Christ. I mean, it's just such a significant thing. Can you imagine I can't imagine anything better. When you look at that Hall of Fame of Faith there, Hebrews chapter 11, the Lord lists, faith is a substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. He says, by faith, Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice. By faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out to a place which he should receive for an inheritance, obeyed. Let's see. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents. By faith, Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be the son of Pharaoh's daughter. And then after Moses and Abraham and Isaac and all of these great people of faith, you get to verse 31 of Hebrews 11. It says, by faith, the harlot Rahab perished not with them that believed not, when she had received the spies with peace. I mean, she's named right there with Moses and Abraham and like all of these great men of the faith. And, and the Bible doesn't even talk. He says, what more should I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon and of Barak, of Samson, of Jephthah, of David, also of Samuel. He doesn't even talk about David, but he took the time to talk about Rahab, here in the book of Hebrews, when he's given an example of great faith. I mean, this, I think, should definitely tell you the significance of who Rahab is and her faith and what that faith can do in terms of making a difference. And it's not about who a person is, who a person was. It's about whether or not they've trusted the Lord and what he can do in a person's life if they really, really trust him. So I love reading that because it's such an encouragement to me. I think probably just because I know my own background story and I know that it's not, it's not great. And so I like reading about it because it just encourages me that, it doesn't matter who you are. You just trust the Lord and he can do great things with you. But here's the other thing that I think is relevant. Yes, especially for women, because I think when we think of the examples that are in the Bible, there's a lot of men there. There aren't as many women that were used greatly. And so I think just having her as such a significant one is important. But then there's the other thing that I want to point out, which is relevant to things that are happening in modern day. And that's, she was in a country that was struggling with political turmoil. And you don't see, Rahab talks about the people and their hearts melting and not having any courage. But at the same time, Rahab's actions, the way she settled her mind, shows that her deep faith allowed her to get through these difficult times just by trusting in the Lord. And one of the things we hear from people a lot right now is people are very worried about the state of the world. And why wouldn't you be? I mean, there's, like I was saying earlier, if you turn on the news, That's obviously going to bring you to a place of stress, right? But we're not supposed to dwell there. That's why we have this appointment with God's word regularly, so that we can keep our mind on him, right? There are renewing of our mind, so we can prove what is that perfect. Oh man, I'm going to get it wrong. Perfect will of God. Let's paraphrase it right there. But anyway, but the idea is that she was really settled in her mind on trusting the Lord. And because of that, no matter, even when her entire country got destroyed, she was in peace because she knew the winning side and just stayed on that side. Now, she had no, real guarantee. I mean, there was a commitment on their part, but there was still the possibility that some rogue person could have run in and killed her family. And then, what would have happened then? Who knows? But their blood would have been on their hands. But I mean, it still wouldn't have changed anything, right? But regardless, she was just like, I'm just going to do the best that I can, trust the Lord, and then he can handle the outcome. And I think that is a perfect example of how people should be handling whatever happens in their, I don't know if I want to say country, but whatever is going on in your different circumstances, because it doesn't have to just be political. I mean, it could be any difficult circumstances. I named a lot of difficult things that had happened to us today. We were talking, Brianna and I were sitting on the front porch this afternoon because there's tornado warning. And I've not ever been in a tornado. I've been very near a tornado, but never in one. And but I'm familiar with the look of a tornado sky, which if you've ever seen one, then you'll know what it looks like. And so we were out on the porch and I'm just like scanning the skies. Our house is kind of up on a hill, so we have a different perspective. So we're looking around and Brianna's like asking me all these questions. What do we do if this happens? What do we do if that happens? And I'm like, she's like, so this is what she asked me. She said, well, what if you're actually like in the tornado? What do you do? And I was like, what do you mean in the tornado? Like me spinning in a circle in the air, like in a tornado? She said, yeah. And I'm like, baby, survive. That's all you can do. You know what I mean? There's no, I can't tell you any tricks. I mean, if something happens, you just got to try your best and let the Lord handle it. I mean, you don't have any answers for that. You can't, this is the problem that people have, is that they really get caught up in trying to make plans for every circumstance. And ultimately you can't make plans and what's the word? Oh man, like it's not navigate. It's like when you play chess. Strategize. That's the word I was thinking of. That people want to be strategic and they want to try to figure out exactly how they would work out a different situation. Well, there's not always answers for that. Not every situation can you be strategic in. You don't always know the outcome. So rather than get stressed about it, you just trust the Lord and do the best that you can, and then he will handle whatever the outcome is. So there's no need to worry about it. You just have to trust the Lord and he can make those things work out, very much like he did with Rahab. Whatever her circumstance was, and they were at the point that they were being, destroyed, right? I mean, you don't have to be a Christian long and you hear the Joshua fit the battle of Jericho. You might have heard that song. We know what happens to Jericho. Jericho is going to be destroyed, but Rahab was not. Rahab was going to continue into eternity, not just herself through salvation, but also, like I said, with being in the line of Christ and even being in God's word as an example of faith to all of us. So lots of great things to learn from the story of Rahab. I guess the last thing that I want to mention is Joshua's response to all of this is that he sees Rahab's faith and he sees the actions of the people and how that they're afraid and how the Lord is working. And he feels uplifted. Remember, the Lord told him to be strong and of a good courage, right? And as someone who's been told that, remember we said that, if the Lord's saying it over and over again, that we're going to assume that he was feeling weak and not particularly courageous. And of course, that's just, subjection. We're just kind of thinking that might be the case since the Lord is saying it over and over again. But here you have him at the very end, hearing what happened with Rahab, hearing what's happening with the people, and he's getting encouraged, right? He says, truly the Lord hath delivered into our hands all the land. It's so funny because the Lord has already told him he's going to do it. He's given him all these instructions. He's doing so much to try to be helpful so that Joshua feels empowered. And yet you get to this point that all of these things happen. And at this point, he says, you know what? I think it's true that the Lord's delivered into our hands all this land. This is what he needed. Like, it wasn't the Lord speaking to him directly and giving him the instructions or telling him to be strong and have a good courage. It was when he hears the story of everything that happened to the spies, then he's like, you know what? I think it's true. I think the Lord's given us all the land and all the inhabitants are fainting. He says, for the inhabitants faint because of us, right? Because he knew the other people were scared, made him feel better. So I think that's kind of neat because, when I think of Joshua, I think of him as being this really powerful, like, general. I know he was in these battles, and I know that the Lord used him as a mighty leader. And I know at the end of the book of Joshua, he takes that strong stand, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, right? So he has this like really strong, powerful kind of personality when I think of him. But then when you read the beginning of this book, you see that, that he is just a regular person. He does have fears. He does have struggles. And because he needs to hear that the other people are worried, for him to feel like, okay, well, they're worried. All right, well, I think we've got this, boys. So it's kind of neat to see all of the characters as real people, because it's like, on one hand, Joshua is this mighty general leading all of the Israelites, and the Lord's with him, and he hears everybody scared, and he's like, all right, we've got this. Meanwhile, you have Rahab sitting in this country of people scared, and you would think that she would be scared with them. She's like, nah, no, the Lord's got it. I'm going to be on his side. And she's like the tough one, And it's funny to me, the dichotomy between the two characters, how that works. How would the people have heard about the Israelites coming? Well, I mean, I think it's like anything. I'm sure we think that, they didn't have telephones. How'd that happen? But I mean, first of all, they would have had a system of watches. I think that just kind of is one thing that you do when you don't, you're going to have people watching your property. But also, I mean, there were people going in and out of cities and talking, and a group as large as the Israelites, particularly given their history of, the drying up of the Red Sea and having defeated those kings, people were watching them. And I am sure they were keeping tabs on what was happening with them. And when that large of a group of people is coming near you, you know what I mean? You don't need a satellite dish for that. People are going to be talking. It's, as they pass through the countryside, there's going to be people telling people. And it's kind of like a grapevine sort of situation. Think of here in America, you have the American Revolution, like the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. This is the story of that they would send night riders to tell, what was happening, things like that. They had a lot of runners. The story of Marathon, how Marathon started. They had a runner who ran that exact distance. I don't remember what the distance of a marathon is, but it's 20 something miles, and that was the distance somebody had to run to tell that something was going to happen. I don't even remember what it was at this moment, but anyway, so they would have people telling. There was a grapevine where news would be shared, so they were definitely watching them. Let's see. I think it was more a thing that he was in the right place and that things will work out for them. Are you talking about Joshua? Or are you talking about Rahab? You tell me. So anyway, what I love about, like I said, this particular story is the realism of the people. You have Rahab, just a regular person with all of their failings, but in spite of their failings, because of their faith, they are someone that God can use in a mighty way, right? And then you have someone else, Joshua, who seems like he's like super strong and amazing and like all of this faith and stuff. And you see him in like weaker moments where he seems more ordinary. And, you know, the Lord is still, it's really, you can see through the person and see the Lord working behind them. And that's, I think, the beauty of it, is because our goal is to see God and not look at the people. But all we see is the people, and that can kind of distract us. So, and that's the problem that people have with Christians today, is they'll look at the imperfect people and think, oh, well, God's clearly failing there. You know, imperfect people are with him. And it's like, no, 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 no. God is so good that he can use imperfect people, and he loves them in spite of their imperfections. And more than that, willing to die for them himself, you know? So, I mean, the whole idea is that here we have the beginning of the story where the Lord is just now, he's taking the Israelites into the promised land. This is going to be their first major battle in the promised land. And he's just showing himself strong in it, on both the side of the Israelites and on the side of the people who are the enemy through Rahab. Just the fact that there is someone of faith in the enemy camp. It's, you know, you can see the Lord working on so many levels. It's amazing. So anyway, all right, well, I've gone through the whole chapter. That's really all I had to say. But I hope you guys have enjoyed Joshua chapter 2. And tomorrow we'll do Joshua 3. And I don't even know. I think we're just probably try to do the whole chapter in one day, depending on what my husband chooses to do. But we're going to continue as they prepare to go into Jericho, because this is a big battle. Like, this is the beginning of the battles that give them the promised land, the thing that they've been waiting for. And all of this is very much a picture as you look through it. Eventually, we're going to get to the book of Revelation. And this is kind of a parallel of that, because the promised land that they're going into is a parallel of heaven. So I want you to pay keen attention, because we're going to make some comparisons. Lady agrees, as we go back and forth. And so anyway, so come back tomorrow and we will continue in Joshua 3. And I have to feed Lady. That's why she's meowing. But let's pray, and we'll be done for the night. Lord, thank you so much for bringing us together tonight. Thank you for your word and the example of Rahab, Lord. And we're just so thankful that you can use anyone. It doesn't matter who they are, as long as they trust you, Lord, you can use them as a vessel for your glory. And I just pray that you would use all of us, no matter where we are, that we would just have the kind of faith that we could stand strong and firm on you and your word, and that we would follow you no matter what the circumstances are. And I just pray that you would encourage us and help us to be strong and have a good courage. And I pray that you would give us wisdom, Lord. Help all of the people who are struggling tonight. I know I mentioned the family that had lost their son. I just pray that you would be especially close to them, Lord, as I know this is a shocking event. Also, the different things that are happening around the world, Lord, in Haiti and Afghanistan. I just pray that you would be with all of those people very closely and show yourself mighty in those circumstances. Help us where we are as well. Lord, I pray you bring us back together tomorrow, and we would just gather around your word and find great comfort and joy and peace in it. I pray you bless us. In Christ's name, amen. Okay, well, that's all that we have for tonight. Appreciate you guys and your patience. Come back, like I said, tomorrow, and we can probably have Rick here to give you many more amusing tales, and he'll take much longer than I do. Anyway, y'all have a good night, and I will see you next time. Bye.